All right. Welcome, welcome. Welcome one, welcome all. Mazel tov on the conclusion of Sefer Ahava, book number 2 of the Rambam, and moving forth into Sefer Zmanim, book number 3. I think every 7 years or so, when they begin the Daf Yomi cycle, they have the expression, Ba Shabbos Ba Menucha. When Shabbos comes, rest comes, because everyone's excited. They begin the new Daf Yomi cycle with brachas, interesting gemaras, stories. Everyone's excited and on, and all of a sudden comes Shabbos and Erevin, and whoa, Ba Shabbos Ba Menucha. Let's take a break over here. The excitement wanes. We've just concluded 2 books, Mada and Ava, books that really are very exciting for all of us. And now we're venturing forth into Shabbos, 30 prakim, Erevin, subjects that are a little bit more complex, subjects that require more patience, longer chapters, prakim that have 30 halachas, sometimes even more than 30 halachas. So one of the purposes of our Siyum today is to energize each and every one of us, to celebrate this milestone, and to give us the koyach to go forward as we learn book number 3, Sefer Zmanim, and we do so with with zest, with chayis, and with understanding. Today's Siyum is thus dedicated in honor of the birthday of my mother, Soll sein gesund. Today is her birthday, and we dedicate today's learning, today's chayis and enthusiasm, and all the added learning that will come from this in honor of her birthday. We have today, to conclude Sefer Ahava, we conclude the book with the laws of Milah. And we have a preeminent Mohel, and I say this not just because that's what I'm supposed to say as an MC to introduce our esteemed guest, but because 5 out of my 6 boys have had their Milah with Rabbi Leeds. His professionalism, his bedside manners, his abilities have earned him a reputation throughout Northern California, an area which is perhaps a difficult area and a difficult niche for traditional Milah to take hold. And he has earned a reputation on all the groups, all throughout Northern California, Bay Area Mohel. It is now my privilege, my honor, to welcome Rabbi Gil Leeds, a dear friend, a colleague, the Shliach at UC Berkeley, one of the premier universities in the United States of America, together with being a Bay Area Mohel. Rabbi Leeds, Shalom Aleichem, welcome, Gil.
Aleichem Shalom. Thank you for having me.
So, a Shliach and a Mohel, how did it happen? What's the story? And if I want to become a Mohel, I know you won't object for me for having 2 Mohels in the area. How did it happen? How did you become a Mohel? Please give us a little introduction about yourself.
I think I offer you every time I do one of your son's bris, and I give you the knife, and you choose to appoint me. But how did it happen to me? So I'll tell you the truth. It was actually probably the last thing I ever imagined doing, to be honest. I grew up in Los Angeles. I'm a Baal Tshuva from the Valley. I grew up in Chabad of Tarzana and Encino. I guess you could say I grew up kind of modern Orthodox. I went to Emek and Eula. I went to UC Berkeley after college, and while I was studying pre-med, I was thinking to be a doctor, a surgeon. I was studying psychology and maybe neuroscience. I was inspired to learn Chassidus. I took by the shluchim in the area at the time. It was Rabbi Ferris, Rabbi Yehuda Ferris, Rabbi Yitzchak Kay. There was also Rabbi Welton here. And it inspired me after learning, also listening to, this was back in the day of broadband internet. I was listening to The Tale of Two Souls, side A, side B on my computer in my Chabad house room. I was listening to Tanya, and it started putting all of my questions into a different light. And it gave me purpose and in being where I was, and inspired me in a way like nothing else. And I decided I want to take a leave of absence from Berkeley and study in, of all places, I went to YG in Australia, Yeshiva Gedola in Melbourne. And while I was there, fast forward 4 years, I completed Shir Dalet in Morristown, Shlichus in Yeshiva Gedola in Miami, Smicha in Morristown, and was engaged to be married to my wife Bracha, who was also a student at UC Berkeley, who was niskarev by the shluchim there. And we were on kind of parallel paths. That's a whole nother story that in its own. And I remember vividly that I was in on Empire, the corner of Empire and Kingston, getting fitted for my kapata with Yisrael Shem Tov. And I got a call from Rabbi Feld, actually his wife, who was on there. He was the Mohel in the Bay Area for I don't know, since the 90s. And he was the SF Bay Area, Northern California region Mohel, asking me if I'd consider moving back to Berkeley once I got married, to take over his position as Mohel so that he can make Aliyah. He knew me and my wife well because when we were students, and this was, in 2000, 2001. And I told him, I said, it would never cross my mind. But I said, when I was the summer in between Berkeley, my freshman year at Berkeley, and going off to Melbourne, I actually was interning in a hospital, in Tarzana Hospital, and I watched a couple surgeries, and I said, I think I could stomach it. I didn't faint in that process. So I'll consider it. So
actually, let me cut you off there. Because I really want to ask you this, because so many people.
Cutting off a Mohel, you have to be careful.
So what would you say? And all of us deal with this in one way, shape, or form. You're coming from the medical background, now the Mohel background. Give us the talking points for all of us. We just learned Hilchos Milah. We're learning about a circumcision. What is it? What would you say to someone? Why have a bris milah? What would you say to convince them? If you had to give them the talking point, why should someone have, in 60 seconds or less, why should someone use you and not go to the hospital?
Well, of course, you want to bring the spiritual component in, but oftentimes, which we know, we're going to read at the end of this at Siyum, that all the bris and all the covenants, this is the covenant of covenants. So that goes without saying. It over supersedes Shabbos and Yom Kippur. This is the most important. Jews risked everything to keep this mitzvah. But if those don't convince somebody and they want to know what the medical reason is, it doesn't take more than to consider the fact that if a procedure in the hospital requires anesthesia and strapping a child down to a table and a restraining board, and it's a prolonged process, and a Mohel is literally, it's finished before it begins. It's a no-brainer. It's like getting your ears pierced. How would you not want to do something that would involve less trauma to the child, less scarring, better aesthetics? We can go on and on. The royal Mohel, the royal family chooses a Mohel because this is a specialty. The
royal family in England chooses a Mohel. That's true.
From what I understand, there's a royal Mohel. And it's actually a mitzvah to cause the child. There's an ounce of pain. It's a normal thing to feel something when something is done to you, but at the same time, it's minimized to the point where Jews celebrate this experience time and time again. And as maybe you heard, they tried to outlaw circumcision in San Francisco.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask you about that because you were at the forefront of this. We live, thank God, in the Bay Area, which is at the forefront of all new isms, and one of them was to outlaw circumcision. And I know you were at the forefront of that. You had a well-known op-ed that was published all over. Could you give us a brief overview? And we are short on time. We have another 3 minutes and so much I want to get to. But how was that? What happened? And can you give us a brief background of how your efforts to keep Milah alive in America?
Well, I don't know if San Francisco is part of America, but it's definitely a republic of some kind here, People's Republic of Berkeley in San Francisco. So they tried to outlaw circumcision, and it actually ended up making me a lot more popular than I could have imagined, because I was involved with the Jewish Federation, Jewish Community Relations Council, which brought me in together with other media. Associated Press came to one of the brises that I was doing in San Francisco. I was interviewed on the John and Ken show down in Southern California. It ended up, bringing me a lot more publicity. I can't say that it was all good publicity, because I made some new friends, but also some enemies. There was an attempt to basically outlaw circumcision for anyone that was under 18 years of age, and it wasn't leveled just against mohels, like practitioners that are outside of the medical field. It was also to hone in on all types of practices, especially doctors. And it was interesting that one interesting thing that I ended up with a $10,000 donation, thanks to someone who heard me say. They said on the John and Ken show, they asked me if I'm going to continue doing it, what happens? I'm going to get jail time and it's going to be $1,000 fine. I said I'm going to be doing it no matter what. And someone sent me a nice check from somewhere down in San Diego. So it really only benefited. And this is not the Greeks couldn't stop us. The Romans, nobody's going to stop this mitzvah. This is going to go on forever. So.
Wow, Yasha Kayach, Yasha Kayach. One quick thing, and this is something that I personally face, because when we have a child and everyone a boy and everyone asks when the bris is going to be, I say it's a Resnick, it's going to be jaundice, and we'll find out. I was late, and many of my kids were late, and it works out well because I get a Sunday bris, and then we get the whole community together, so it's nice to push it off a little bit. But can you give us some basic backgrounds? Because I know sometimes in the secular world they said, what are you pushing it off? It's not dangerous, it is dangerous. Give us some general guidelines. We've learned about sakana, we've learned about Chiyah Shabbos, not pushing off Shabbos. Can you give us some general guidelines as a Mohel of how you see it?
So practically speaking, yes, that is a challenge, that the medical world is not looking for jaundice at the level that we're looking for jaundice. Jaundice, first of all, is a condition where there's an excess amount of a toxin called bilirubin, which is a byproduct of when the blood cells break down. This is something that the liver is supposed to take care of and remove. And when there's too much bilirubin, the skin changes color. It's something, if someone's an alcoholic and their liver doesn't work properly, then they'll have an excess of this color. And it's due to this toxin called bilirubin. So when there's an excess in bilirubin, it's something that can obviously reach high levels, elevated levels, like in the range of today. They do blood tests to check this amount, and it's when it reaches over, let's say 20 or so, or depends on which day of the life. There's a bell curve, there's different statistics. So depending on what number it reaches on which day of a child's life, it could be actually life-threatening. And so doctors are monitoring that. When the Torah is monitoring it, we're not just looking for it in the case of an extreme level of jaundice. Halacha is looking for what anesthesiologists, I remember I did a bris for them and their baby was a little jaundiced, and he said, oh, I understand. You're looking for an optimized health. The same way that the anesthesiologist doesn't want to do a circumcision or any procedure for you, put you under the knife. If you have a little cough 3 weeks ago, is the same level of concern that the Torah has as at the end of Perek Echad of Hilchos Milah, where the Rambam speaks about it's impossible. It's always possible to do bris later, but we can't bring back one life. So this is the ultimate concern. And the Mohel has the final say. And I think there's a letter from the Frierdiker Rebbe about how the 8th day is when the Mohel says it's the baby's ready. So in Chabad especially, we're much more machmir on this. And other communities will do brisin way high. But there is today not just Tvias Ayin, like the way that we look at visual assessment, but there's also an actual number, which we try to stick to, and sometimes it's hard to get actual numbers, but there's a general approach to that. And it's overall, when you explain it that way to parents, they understand that you have the Torah has the ultimate, like the most conservative perspective, looking at the baby from all holistically, wanting to make sure that the same God that told us to do it on the 8th day also tells us to protect our life to the utmost.
Wow, thank you for that assessment from based on your professional understanding. Before we let you go, and before we do the Siyum, Rabbi Gil, what was, out of all the brisim you've done, and I know you do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, give us the most out there, interesting bris that you can think of right now.
So I would say this was about 7 years ago. It was right after Rosh Hashanah. We're here with hundreds of students on campus, and I get a call from a family, Israeli family, who's up 3 hours drive from me in Grass Valley. And he tells me he's off the grid. And he says, you're going to have to bring a 4x4 vehicle to get to me. And the story is that this family was having a boy, an Israeli couple, and they lived in this place where they're growing marijuana in abundance. And it's off the grid for a reason. And it's called Hamakor. The location I get there, it's Hamakor. It's called the source. And I literally wasn't sure why I'm coming, and it's a long ways. It's 3 hours each way. I meet one of his friends outside a Safeway. He has dreadlocks and big hair, and he's like, follow me. We're gonna go off-roading now. We go for 30 minutes. We drive through like a river, and I get to this place. I see trees of marijuana growing everywhere, and this little hut. It's like a hovel, a little shack, and I'm sitting there. I come up and I see it's a minyan of Israelis there that are living here in the community. And the story is that this family didn't want to have a bris. They're very disconnected Jewishly, as you could imagine. And during labor, they were distressed. The child was under distress, and they didn't know he was going to make it. And the father pledged. He said, if the baby is born, I'm going to do a proper bris. And so that's why I was called. And that was one of the most meaningful and exciting experiences that I've experienced.
Rabbi Leeds, thank you very, very, very much. The Eibusher should benefit you to be able to machnis so many other neshamas under the Shechina and the Bris of Avraham Avinu, and together with your Rebbetzin, you should continue your incredible work at Chabad, at UC Berkeley, the Mount of Balei Tshuvas, and the successful Chabadas that you run. And now we'd like to ask to honor you, please, with being Messiah. We're doing the Siyum. We've read all the Tefillas, but beforehand, the being Messiah Hilchas Milah from our Mohel. We can please ask the moderator to please put up the very last halacha as we're going to conclude, and a mazel tov for Sefer Ahava.
Come and let's see how severe, how important the matter of bris milah, of circumcision, is. That Moshe Rabbeinu was not granted even a temporary break from fulfilling this mitzvah. As we know the story, he was on the road. He was going to take the Jews out of Egypt. You would think that's pretty important. And he had a baby in between. It sounds like the Chabad Shliach trying to save the world, and suddenly he has a baby. But no, he was not off the hook. He had to do it on time. And the whole mitzvahs, all the entire mitzvahs in the entire Torah have only 3 covenants associated. So we have 3 covenants throughout the whole Torah for all the mitzvahs put together. But when it comes to circumcision, he had 13 covenants for this. It's a good thing we didn't get the bris at 13 years. But 13 covenants, and I'll place my covenant between me and you. Ani hine brisi itach, va'kimoisi es brisi beini uvenecha, levris olam, va'ata es brisi tishmar, zois brisi asher tishmeru, v'haya la'ois bris, v'haisa brisi v'vsarchem, levris olam es brisi hefar, va'kimoisi es brisi itoi, levris olam es brisi akim es yitzchak. So, that's it.
Thank you.
I'll keep it short and to the point, as I say.
Thank you, Rabbi Leeds, Yashakayach, and Maskifim Ashlama Laschala. We immediately move to the beginning of a new book, and we are honored with the privilege of having with us today to begin Sefer Zmanim. On behalf of ourselves, all those watching on Chabad.org, those who will continue to watch this broadcast afterwards, Rabbi Shais Taub. Rabbi Shais Taub is coming in the middle of 45 different things. He did everything he could to be on, just coming from a wedding. I don't even know where you're going to.
I'm at the wedding.
You're at the wedding.
I'm at the wedding, yeah.
At
you might
the
hear
wedding.
the music in the background.
But before we begin, and there's so much to say, can we please honor you with beginning Sefer Zmanim? That's going to be up on the board, and if you're able to see it, just read and teach us the very first halacha, which we learned.
Okay. I'm going to have to, you see, I'm old. I have to take a... Okay. Yeah.
Can we make the screen a little bit bigger, perhaps? I don't know if we can magnify it, but okay.
Maybe roll it down a little bit, because we want to say start with the halacha. Or you want to start?
No, just the halacha. Just the halacha.
Okay, fine, no problem. Okay, all right. It's a little bit blocked right now, so make it a little smaller.
You see that?
Yeah, make it a little bit smaller because it's a little bit blocked by your thumbnail. Okay.
There.
Now roll it down. Don't move it. That's perfect. Okay, so we're starting Zmanim. Fine. Shvisa b'shvi mimlocha mitzvah saseh. Resting from labor on the 7th day, meaning Shabbos, is a positive commandment. Shenemar, like it says, V'yem hashvi tishbeis. On the 7th day, rest. V'chol ha'esa bei malacha. Anyone who does work on that day, bittul mitzvah saseh. Not only is he over on a prohibition, but he's also negating the fulfillment of a positive commandment. V'aver, and like we said, saseh. Don't do work. Umahu chayav alasiyas malacha. And what is the chayav for if he does malacha? But it's saying chayav kares. If he does it intentionally, then he's going to get kares. And if it is witnessed by 2 Jews who warn him, niskol, he'll be stoned, capital punishment. V'im osa bishkaga, if he does it unwittingly, chayav korban chatos kavua. He should bring a sin offering sacrifice.
Yasha koyach. Thank you. So, Bosh Shabbos Bamanucha, after two great books, now Shabbos comes and people take a little bit of a break because these are harder and longer halachas. And one of the purposes of our Siyum is to infuse new energy and so that we get rejuvenated and we learn this book correctly. Now, before Rabbi Taub was the Rabbi Taub, what were known, the way that at least I got to know Rabbi Taub was with his map of the Tanya. The first time I heard you give a lecture at a Kinnas HaShluchim, a map of the Tanya. And if there's any book that's sort of the master of organization, it's the Rambam. So I'm curious to hear, in terms of you, the organizer and the person who has given us this picture in a Chayis and Tanya, maybe you can give us through your lens a Chayis and Rambam and from an organizational perspective as well.
You know, that's a fantastic question. You know, one of the last times I was speaking to my dear mentor and friend, Rabbi Josh Gordon, Olav Shalom, who we know did Rambam on Chabad.org, as well as Chitas. So when he finished doing Rambam, he used to tell me, by the way, and I didn't know about his health situation because he was very private about it, but I remember him sharing with me that every morning he would get up and prepare the Rambam beforehand by himself and then give it as a share. And that the time in the early hours when he would learn Rambam, prepare Rambam, he called that his Rambam therapy. And he told me when he finished the whole thing, it took him 3 years because he did the one perek a day. So he said, Rambam's amazing. He said, I never appreciated Rambam. I said, what about the Rambam do you appreciate now? He said, the structure. That's what he told me, the structure, the organization. So let's talk a little bit about the structure. Obviously, the Rambam has a different structure than the Mishnah. First of all, the Mishnah is organized in 6 orders, and the Rambam organizes his compendium in 14 volumes. So it's a little bit different. It's obviously different. And he has a different order how he does things. Like Zroyim, for instance, is the first Seder in the Mishnah. With the Rambam, it's in the middle of the whole Yad HaChazaka. So he has a different order. Now, I'm going to focus on the Sefer that we were just Messiah on, Sefer Ahava. But let's talk about it a little bit. Okay, so first we have Mada. Mada is the knowledge you have to know. I mean, in fact, we begin with Yesodei HaTorah. So literally, he's building a foundation. Yesod means a foundation. So he's building a building. Okay. Now, after he finishes the Mada, the things you have to know, he goes to Ava. What's with Ava? He tells us what Ava is. Ava isn't just a nice, cute name for a book. You know, who wrote the Book of Love? The Rambam wrote the Book of Love, Sefer Ahava, right? But he says, and remember, before Sefer Mada even begins, there's a minyan of mitzvahs, and he says the mitzvahs according to the different svarim. So he says why he put the mitzvahs on Sefer Ahava that he put there. He says these are mitzvahs that are tadiros, that are constant. And they were given to us for the purpose of constantly reminding us of Hashem. So the mitzvahs that are in Sefer Ahava are mitzvahs that we do constantly, that we're supposed to do all the time. Now, within that, he builds up in frequency. So the mitzvahs that are most frequent or most constant, Todir, he starts with, until he ends with Bris Milah, which you only do once in your lifetime. Right? If you do it right, you only do it once in your lifetime. Okay. So anyways, I'll share with you something that's connected to Parshat V'Eschanim.
So he starts with Shema and then davening. Why Shema before davening then?
Because Shema is twice a day. Davening is only midraisa once a day.
Okay, keep on going. Then woman, take us through the book.
I know there's a lot of noise in the background, by the way.
It's okay. You're at a wedding and you're excused. So take us through. Shema is twice a day. Davening is once a day, and then he continues in Birchas Kainim. Okay, and then. So
there's a whole progression. Why the Rebbe explains the Sikha, actually. It's from Parshas Chelach Chopes, where it explains from this week's Parshas V'Eschanim, what the Rebbe explains why, it's based on a Torah of the Ragashover, why the Rambam considers each one of the mitzvahs increasingly less tadir, increasingly less frequent.
Can you give us it in 3 minutes?
So I want to, because I only have 3 minutes, I want to focus on something that's very geschmack.
Okay, go ahead.
And it's connected to the Parsha of the week. In Parshas V'schanan, we have the Shema, and we have the mitzvahs of Ukshartum la'es al yedecha v'hoyu l'teteves beinenecha. 2 mitzvahs, the mitzvahs of Tefillin shel yad and Tefillin shel rosh. Okay, so it's interesting. In the Psukim, it's Ukshartum la'es al yedecha v'hoyu l'teteves beinenecha. It's heart and then head. The Rambam does it the opposite. He says the head Tefillin, and then he says the hand Tefillin. Why does he flip the order? So the Rebbe says like this. You'll notice another diuk, that when the Rambam describes what the mitzvah is, he says the mitzvah is the kshira, the koshra, to tie it. It's the action of tying. With the head Tefillin, it's v'hoyu l'teiteves beinenecha. They should be liyois hatfillin, that the tefillin should just be. They should just be there. The Rogatchover explains that the mitzvah of the hand is just to put it on. And once you put it on, you're done with the mitzvah. The mitzvah of the head is that it should be there. And the Rebbe also explains with a little bit of Tanya there about the difference between the head and the heart. That with the heart, you're constantly having to resist because the heart has its will and you have to fight it each and every time. So you can only really get it under control for a second. With the head, your job is not to be confused. Your job is to know the right thing. Your head, you're supposed to always have a clear head. And that's what Torah does for us. So so the Rebbe explains like this. With the hand tefillin, the mitzvah is put it on. With the mitzvah, with the head tefillin, the mitzvah is that it is on. It's in a state of being on. So therefore, which one is more tadir? Which one is more constant? Clearly, the head tefillin, because it stays on. The whole time it's on is the mitzvah. The hand tefillin is only mitzvah putting it on. The head tefillin is a mitzvah the whole time that it's on. So it's more constant. And that's why, according to the order of the whole Sefer Ahava, what's more constant goes first, the Rambam flips the order. And even though in the Psukim, it says, but the Rambam's not going according to the Psukim. If he were going according to the Psukim, he would be like the Sefer Achinuch and go according to the Parsha. So you see, even with something like that, how the order, not just the Rambam's description of every mitzvah, but the order, how he puts the mitzvahs is so precise.
Wow. Okay. Based on this, everyone's going to have to figure out on their own why then goes Sefer Torah, Tzitzis, and Brachas. That we'll have to fit on our own. So you've heard it first here, gentlemen.
Check out the Sikha.
Yeah, that Rabbi Taub are all going to look forward to the big map on Rambam, which will come, God willing, in the right time. And
yes, Hashem.
Thank you so much for in the middle of a chasana, from the simcha to the simcha of finishing the Torah to the simcha of the chasana and the kala. Thank you very much, Rabbi Taub. Yasher Koach. God bless the work that you do in inspiring audiences and teaching chassidus around the world. God bless you. Thank you. And as we do conclude, we have actually a phenomenal trivia. We're going to now put up 10 questions. Let's see what we get. These are questions that everyone should be able to remember. We're going to put them up right now, and I'm going to read them out loud as the trivia comes up on the board. The winner, of course, is $100 towards a set Sefer of Rambam of your choice. Number 1, which reason does the Rambam bring for saying Baruch Shem between Shema and V'ahavta? Now, there might be other reasons you know, but which one does the Rambam mention? Does he say A, because Yaakov said it to his children? Does he say B, because Moshe heard it from the Malachim? Both or neither? Which ones does the Rambam bring? Number 2, if someone is davening after Zman Tefillah, not that ever happens, what is the opinion of the Rambam whether to say Birchas Krishma as well? A, you don't say them. B, you can say them. C, there's an argument. Or D, the Rambam doesn't discuss it. Do you remember? Number C, how many things must you do and how many important things should you do before davening, right? The Rambam describes between the musts and the shoulds. So is it 7 musts and 10 shoulds, 5 musts and 8 shoulds, 8 musts and 5 shoulds, 5 and 5. See if you remember the Rambam had a whole chapter about that. Okay, number 4. Where does the Rambam talk about the importance of preparing yourself mentally before davening? What does he say? He says if you didn't have kavanah, you need to read daven. Does he say Chassidim or Rishonim would spend an hour before davening? Does he say when you come from a trip, it's better to wait 3 days to relax, to give you time to get in the mental framework of davening? Or all of the above, does the Rambam mention all of these? One or all, or which one? Number 5, how many brachas of tefillin does the Rambam paskin to say without any hefsek? How many brachas should we say on tefillin if you didn't make an interruption between tefillin shiyad? 1, 2, 3, or he does not discuss it? Number 6, which of the following did Ezra institute? Did he institute Shemona Esrei, Kriyas HaTorah on Shabbos Mincha, the Meturgeman, right, the translator that Rambam taught us about, to read the Klalos before Rosh Hashanah and Shavuos, right, Kisavei and Mechukaisai, or all of the above, which of or all of were instituted by Ezra? Number 7, where does the Rambam write about Shnai Mikra Ve'echad Targum? Where does he talk about that? Does he talk about that in Hilchas Sefer Torah, Hilchas Tefila, Hilchas Tefillin, Hilchas Nusach HaTefila, Hilchas Tefila, or Hilchas Brachas? Where does the Rambam discuss that? Number 8, where does the number 20? Where does the number 20 come up in this sefer? It's a tough one. Okay. Things that are a must for a kohen to do birchas kohenim. There are 20 things a kohen needs to have for birchas kohenim. There are 20 things you need for writing a mezuzah, 20 things you need for writing a tefillin, or 20 things for writing a Torah. Who remembers that Rambam has a lot of lists in this book? Number 9, when does a baby get a bris? At 1 day old. Is there a situation where a baby has a bris at 1 day old? Number 1, a very healthy baby. Number 2, B, never. C, born a week after the due date, or an eved that was purchased at 1 day old. Is there a situation, and if so, which one, where a baby gets a bris at 1 day old? And finally, for what does the Rambam tell us? He tells us, and those of you who are at the Siyum, we mentioned this briefly, but this is not what we're referring to here. The Rambam say that the Milah has bris 13 times, and the Torah has 3. Where does the Rambam mention this? Not at the end, not at the Siyum. Does he talk about this, why we make a bris while wearing tefillin? Why we mention the bris before Torah in benching? Why giving a bris is more important than writing a Torah? Why a bris is done at such a young age? Take a few moments, fill this out, and we are going to go through the answers. We spent a long time reading the questions, so moderator, let us know, but I think we can finish in about 30 seconds or so. Okay, are we done, moderator? Have we had all the questions submitted? Okay, the answers. Why do we say Baruch Shem? What does the Rambam tell us? Because that's what Yaakov said to his children. That's the reason the Rambam mentions. If you daven after Zman Tefila, can you say Birchas Kriya Shema? Yes. B, you can still say them. How many things must you do before davening, and how many should you do before davening to get in the right place, the right time, the right things, right dress? That was 5 things you must do, 8 things you should do. That's the right answer. The Rambam talks about mentally preparing yourself before davening. He mentions all of them. He talks about having kavanah. If you don't have kavanah, you need to read daven. He talks about the Chassidim Harishonim who would spend an hour before davening, and he says that when you come back from a journey, wait 3 days to get in the mental framework of davening. How many brachas of tefillin does the Rambam mention? 1. Which of the following did Ezra institute? He instituted all of them. Shemona Esrei, Kriyas HaTorah on Shabbos at Mincha, the Meturgeman, the translator, and to read the curses in the Torah, the Teichacha, before Rosh Hashanah and Shavuos. Where does the Rambam talk about Shnai Mikra Ve'echad Targum? That was in Hilchas Tefila. Where did the number 20 come up? That was 20 things that you need to write a Torah. When can a baby have a bris at 1 day old? The answer is, if one purchased an eved at 1 day old, then they would be obligated to have the bris milah right away. And finally, where does Rambam discuss 13 brisim, 13 covenants created for the bris, and 13 covenants, 3 for Torah? The answer is, that's the reason that in benching, We mentioned bris before Torah in the second bracha benching. We mentioned bris before Torah. Thank you very much. This was an incredible program. Thank you, Rabbi Leeds. Thank you, Rabbi Taub. God bless everybody. And again, thank you to all those who really run this program: Rabbi Yaakov Tzvi Cantor, Rabbi Chaim Zaklis, Rabbi Slonim, Rabbi Lane, Rabbi Lipsker, Rabbi Glasman, Rabbi Darren, and all those who are behind the scenes. Thank you. God bless each and every one of you. May we all learn Sefer Zmanim with enthusiasm, understand the halachas. Yes, there are long chapters. God should help us. We should understand them and learn them with chayas. And we look forward, this is a lengthy Sefer, to joining together again, celebrating the conclusion of Sefer Zmanim. Hatzlacha Rabba, Mazel Tov, and thank you very much, everybody, for joining us here this evening.